ministre, quelle est sa stratégie afin de limiter la propagation du variant Delta qui se propage à travers les personnes infectées mais présymptomatiques et aussi à travers celles qui sont asymptomatiques et qui infectent les autres sans même le savoir?
Mr. Speaker, sir, sanitary measures. It means properly wearing masks, whether somebody is exposed to anybody who is infected or not, and doing the vaccination is the key to fight COVID-19.
The minister explained, but he can't distribute rapid COVID tests freely to everyone. Fair enough. But let me remind the House that it is an expensive test for many of our Mauritian fellows. Not everybody can afford to have a COVID test every week or every day. So my request to the Honourable Minister, if he can at least consider for those on the social register to be able to have a free COVID test per family according to certain set criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will forward the request to the Ministry of Commerce and Consumer Protection if ever this can be applied to provide tests these at a reasonable price.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mais nous pouvons aussi constater qu'un grand nombre des membres de la même famille se contaminent entre eux et malheureusement, ça entraîne des fois à des décès. Et un moyen pour briser cette chaîne de transmission serait d'encourager les personnes de se faire tester avant des rencontres familiales à travers des tests rapides, par exemple. Et sur le même point que mon collègue, acheter ces tests en pharmacie n'est pas nécessairement à la portée de tous. Et dans un esprit d'équité, ne serait-il pas souhaitable de les rendre plus accessibles et plus abordables à tous?
Mr. Speaker, sir, the basic fundamental, again, of fighting COVID is, yes, I understand that in a family, it's not possible for family members to exercise all the sanitary measures, but yet doing vaccination and trying to limit close contact would be obviously favored. Now, considering to provide rapid antigen tests for where, this has to be again, we have to look at it, and if ever it's possible to, especially on the price, what the Honourable Member Amir has said, that if we can control the price of the self-test sold in the pharmacies, that I have to look into with the Ministry of Commerce and Consumer Protection.
Next question.
B1260.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the number of reported cases relating to child sex trafficking to my ministry since January 2015 to date stands at 36 and are all female. With reference to Part A of the question, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that since January 2015 to date, there has been one conviction secured. As regards Parts B and C of the question, I shall elaborate, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the main measures that my ministry has put in place to tackle the issue of child sex trafficking, as well as the protection and care that is provided to the victims of child sex trafficking. All cases of alleged child trafficking are made known to my ministry, recorded at the level of the CDU for social inquiry. The reported cases, if not reported to the police, are simultaneously reported to the police for criminal inquiry. There are also joint interviews by the police and CDU officers of my ministry in order to avoid repeated narration of the incident. There is a close collaboration with the Brigade pour la Protection des Mineurs and other stakeholders to assist in the identification of victims and providing them with the support. The Brigade carries out raids in game houses, hotels, discotheques, and also investigates in suspected cases of child trafficking. Child victims are also provided with immediate and long-term protective and support services at the level of the 6 CDU outstationed across the island, that is one at Goodlands, Flax, Souillac, Port-Louis, Bamboo, and Vakwa. Protective and supporting services are also provided in the daytime drop-in centre at Port Louis and the RCI at Grande Rivière Nord-Ouest. The drop-in centre provides for mainly these services, but not limited to, long-term counselling and therapy, monthly medical sessions, parental counselling, couple and contraceptive counselling, monthly home visits to the clients, prevention sensitization of adolescents on on sexual abuse and teenage pregnancy. In some cases, referrals are made to NGOs and other institutions as and when required. Clinical services, including visits to a gynecologist at the Mauritius Family Planning and Welfare Association Clinic, HIV testing, pregnancy testing, and only to end with an ongoing list, Mr. Speaker, sir, the residential centre ensures better protection and assistance to children who are victims of child sex trafficking in a very sustainable manner. It provides adequate, appropriate and safe shelter to children victims of exploitation. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the preventive level, the Child Development Unit carried out 101 campaigns from January 2015 to October this year on the commercial sexual exploitation of children, including the topic of child sex trafficking, wherein 5,570 persons were reached with the campaigns. From 2015 to October this year, a total of 187 campaigns have been carried out by the drop-in centre, reaching 6,870 persons. There is the Atelier Partage Parents that is ongoing, the school child protection clubs, radio programs, and in different languages, Mr. Speaker, sir, broadcast has also been successful in reaching out the maximum number of people. And yes, as far as...
Merci. Plusieurs organismes internationaux, tels le Conseil des droits de l'homme des Nations Unies, indiquent que l'île Maurice est une destination importante pour le tourisme pédophile. Et du fait que nos frontières sont désormais ouvertes, peut-on savoir de l'honorable ministre si une étude à l'échelle nationale a été entreprise ou sera entreprise afin de comprendre ce fléau et quelles sont les mesures prises pour combattre le tourisme pédophile?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would love to, for the honourable member to give me a bit more details about the report that she just quoted from, and I would like to reassure the House that a zero-tolerance approach is adopted when it comes to child trafficking and the protection of the child, and this is done in collaboration with our international instances as well. And for example, with the enactment, the upcoming enactment of the Child Sex Offender Register, a central database is being set up at the Crime Record Office for keeping record of persons convicted for offences related to child abuse, be it on our national soil or internationally.
Par rapport au rétablissement et la réinsertion des victimes, la ministre a parlé des drop-in centers. Mais avoir des drop-in centers mis sur pied ne veut pas automatiquement dire que les services sont adéquats et appropriés pour ces victimes. Donc, puis-je demander à l'honorable ministre comment est assuré que ces victimes reçoivent les services qui sont appropriés dans ces drop-in centers?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to reassure the House that these protective and supported services are not plucked out of thin air. They are discussed, they are very reinforced programs that address the specificities of children who are either allegedly victims of abuse or have actually been victims of exploitation. Therefore, should the honourable member or any other member of the House, for that matter, have any further contribution or suggestion on how to enhance those services at the drop-in centres, I would be very, very happy to sit down and hear their inputs. Thank you.
Next question.
B1261.
Mr. Speaker, sir, according to the records kept at the level of my ministry, the total number of nurseries stand at 377, among which 7 are managed by the municipal councils, 1 is managed by the National Children's Council, and there are 369 privately owned nurseries across the island. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that the creche voucher scheme is already being implemented by the National Empowerment Foundation to assist beneficiaries on the social register of Mauritius. A grant of 2,000 rupees is payable on a monthly basis to any registered nursery per child enrolled from a family registered on the social register of Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is also helping the privately owned nurseries through the following 2 schemes. The first one being a one-off cash grant to help the nurseries to obtain registration with my ministry, meant for enhancement of their infrastructure and training of their personnel. Secondly, the investment in creche by a company scheme, whereby any company which has incurred expenditure on a nursery for the benefit of its employees may deduct twice the amount from its gross income for the year, as informed by the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. Mr. Speaker, sir, the question of granting a subsidy on the fees payable in respect of privately owned nurseries is being considered at the level of the Ministry of Finance. We obviously have to take into account the various far-reaching implications of such a measure.
Merci. Je me réjouis de la réponse de l'honorable ministre, car le développement de la petite enfance est crucial parce qu'il est démontré que 80% du cerveau de l'enfant se développe avant l'âge de 3 ans et cela pourra aussi aider les mamans à prendre un travail. Puis-je demander à l'honorable ministre si son ministère envisage de venir avec la construction de plus d'écoles maternelles publiques?
Mr. Speaker, sir, demands for registration of new creche institutions come to my ministry on quite a regular basis, and these demands for registration are considered obviously on a case-to-case basis. There are site visits that are conducted. There are very rigid criteria that are already established prior to granting a license to operate a creche. So whether we are going to be considering opening up further creche or taking into account all the demands, yes, we have to meet the demands of a dynamic and growing society, so why not?
Yes, can I ask the Honourable Minister whether, in the context of COVID, capacity of accepting inmates by publicly owned nurseries have reduced?
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is not very directly associated with the question, the main question, but I will try to answer. If I'm understanding correctly, your question is whether the number of people registering in creche has decreased. There has not been a study carried out to that effect, but it is obvious that as parents, we have taken all our information pertaining to whether it is safe to be sending the children to the creche, and there are policy decisions whether to keep the creche open, which we have. Because one has to understand, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the level of exposure within a creche is fairly limited compared to a school that is welcoming 300 to 400 students in one go. Creche normally operate on a very limited number of children attending and a very good ratio of carers to children, obviously adhering to all sanitary measures that have been set up in those places.
Next question.
B1262.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai été informé que le nombre d'employés des 4 casinos dans lesquels la State Investment Corporation Limited détient une participation majoritaire, à savoir le Grand Casino du Domaine, le Codan Waterfront Casino Limited, le Casino de Maurice Limited et le Grand Bay Casino Limited, qui ont été infectés à la COVID-19 entre le 1er mars 2021 et le 25 novembre 2021 s'élève à 70, sur un nombre total de 674 employés. Sur les 70 employés, 6 ont été trouvés malades sur leur lieu de travail et transférés à l'hôpital, après quoi ils ont été testés positifs et auto-isolés. et 64 étaient à leur domicile et ont été déclarés positifs au test. En ce qui concerne la partie B de la question, j'ai été informé que les casinos suivent les protocoles établis par les autorités, y compris les suivants. L'accès contrôlé au casino, sachant que l'accès n'est autorisé qu'au personnel et aux joueurs vaccinés. Ceux qui ne peuvent pas être vaccinés pour des raisons médicales doivent présenter les résultats d'un test PCR valable sur 7 jours. Toutes les personnes accédant au casino sont soumises à des contrôles de température corporelle. Des désinfectants pour les mains sont fournis à l'entrée. Toutes les personnes accédant aux locaux des casinos doivent porter des masques. Des désinfectants pour les mains sont également mis à disposition dans toutes les zones du casino. La distanciation physique est pratiquée dans les locaux du casino. Il y a aussi le port d'un masque facial est obligatoire en tout temps dans les locaux du casino et la fourniture de masques faciaux, de visières, de gants et de combinaisons selon les besoins du personnel en fonction de la nature de leur travail. Monsieur le Président, j'ai également été informé que des précautions supplémentaires de sécurité sont en place dans les locaux des casinos, tels qu'un nettoyage en profondeur lorsqu'un cas positif est détecté, ainsi qu'une désinfection régulière et la mise à disposition d'un test antigénique rapide pour les employés présentant des symptômes de la COVID-19. Les employés qui n'ont pas de température élevée, mais qui présentent des symptômes de la COVID-19 sont renvoyés chez eux par mesure de précaution. Merci.
Merci. J'ai en ma possession une photo d'un avis daté du 15 novembre 2021 du Grand Casino du Domaine qui stipule que le nombre maximum permis à la fois dans ce casino est de 240 personnes. Puis-je demander à l'honorable ministre quelle est la logique de permettre 240 personnes à la fois dans ce casino, qui est en passant un endroit fermé d'intérieur, quand, depuis le 12 novembre, les rassemblements publics et privés sont limités à 50 personnes à la fois, peu importe la dimension de l'endroit, et les rassemblements religieux en extérieur à 10 personnes.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie l'honorable membre pour cette question. Je voudrais tenir à préciser que c'est un lieu de travail. Donc, c'est comme dans les entreprises, c'est comme dans les centres commerciaux. Nous avons pris des dispositions spécifiques par rapport à ce lieu de travail. Donc, par rapport à ce casino que vous êtes en train de dire, je vais vous donner quelques informations. Le nombre de personnes admises est de 240, mais parmi ces 165 personnes qui sont externes au casino, qui sont admises à l'intérieur. C'est un lieu de travail. On n'a pas pris de disposition par rapport à ces lieux de travail.
Honourable Nia.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, so what we've just heard from the Honourable Minister of Finance is shocking. It's really shocking because for religious places, we are interdicting people for 10 persons only. And what's your problem?
Order.
What's your problem?
Order.
So, we are interdicting people to go to religious places to only 10 persons, and for casinos, we are allowing 240 people to enter the casino. What's the logic? What's the rationale behind this?
Okay, you put your question.
Monsieur le Président, sur les 240 personnes qui sont autorisées dans ce casino, il y a environ 100 personnes qui travaillent dans ce casino. J'aimerais demander à cet honorable membre...
Order.
Je peux répondre à la...
Order.
Je demanderai à l'honorable membre, est-ce qu'il est en train de nous dire qu'il faut interdire les jeux à Maurice? C'est ça sa question? C'est ça sa question? Si c'est sa question, il faut qu'il vienne avec une question spécifique dessus.
Next question. You had a question.
Well, insofar as a comparison being made with a workplace has got partitioning. People in offices, sub-officers, and all, not 250 persons at one place at one go. We are not comparing likes with likes here, Honourable Minister.
Monsieur le Président, je vais répondre à cette question. Je crois que l'honorable membre n'a pas visité toutes les entreprises à Maurice. Il devrait aller faire des visites un peu partout pour voir comment travaillent les gens. Si vous allez dans les entreprises, vous avez 2000 employés qui travaillent sur le même floor. C'est pareil, c'est pour ça qu'on a mis en place des protocoles de précaution concernant les mesures sanitaires dans toutes les entreprises. Ce sont les mêmes règles qui s'appliquent.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le ministre, ce que vous venez de dire à la Chambre est vraiment troublant. Parce que, dites-vous bien qu'il n'y a pas que les casinos, Monsieur le ministre, il y a aussi des restaurants, des petites entreprises qui travaillent légalement pour essayer de, tant bien que mal, de joindre les deux bouts dans ce Covid que nous vivons. Vous parlez de 240 personnes dans un casino, it's a working place. Mais les restaurants, les tabagies ou les petits snacks sont aussi des working places.
Je tiens à préciser à l'honorable membre,
Order.
tous ces lieux de travail, on n'a pas fermé ces lieux de travail à ma connaissance, sauf si, pendant que j'étais malade, on a annoncé des nouvelles dont je ne suis pas au courant. Et j'ajouterai dessus, si l'honorable membre est en train de parler des restaurants, des places où on travaille, où il y a des petites gens qui travaillent, j'aimerais souligner à cet honorable membre, c'est ici, c'est ce gouvernement qui a décidé récemment de continuer à payer les salaires dans ces petits restaurants qui sont en train d'avoir des petites gens. Merci, monsieur.
Next question, Honorable David.
B 1263.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I presume the honourable member is referring to equipment used for medical high-flow oxygen therapy, which is a device to administer high-flow oxygen to a patient and is rather quantified in numbers and not in volume. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that no medical high-flow oxygen device was procured in the years 2019 and 2020. In the year 2021, my ministry procured one medical high-flow oxygen device from FTM Mauritius Limited at the cost of 219,000 rupees. This equipment is installed at New ENT Hospital. Mr. Speaker, sir, I also wish to refer to honourable member to the reply I made to PQ B1171 at our sitting on 23rd November 2021, whereby I informed that following a bidding exercise, an award for additional 10 units of high-flow oxygen device has been made on 18th November 2021, and the delivery thereof is expected by 6 January 2022.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Dans la réponse du ministre, effectivement, à la question parlementaire B1171 du 23 novembre, il avait été question d'un fournisseur qui avait initialement reçu une commande le 6 avril, avant d'informer le ministère le 22 avril qu'il ne serait pas en mesure d'honorer son contrat en raison des coûts de fret qui avaient augmenté. Et par conséquent, la commande du ministère avait été annulée. Puis-je demander au ministre le nom de ce fournisseur en question?
Mr. Speaker, sir, if I'm not mistaken, I've already submitted to the ministry, to the parliament, or already submitted the information. But at this
Order.
point,
Next.
Je précise au ministre qu'il n'avait pas mentionné, et j'ai vérifié dans le Hansard, ce nom de fournisseur n'apparaît toujours pas à ce jour. En relation à cette question, par rapport à l'oxygène médical, nous avons toutes et tous compris qu'après les vaccins et les antiviraux, c'est la course à l'oxygène. Puis-je demander au ministre si au niveau de son ministère, il y a un monitoring qui est effectué sur la quantité d'oxygène médical qui est consommée dans nos hôpitaux publics en fonction de ce qui est produit par le seul fournisseur contractuel depuis 2020, parce que je comprends dans le statement du ministre, en date du 23 novembre, que c'est ce fournisseur, Samlo Koyenko Steel Co. Limited, dont le nom a été mentionné, c'est ce fournisseur qui est venu au ministère à la mi-novembre 2021 pour dire qu'il ne pouvait plus fournir d'oxygène, ce qui a alors provoqué une réunion catastrophe au ministère le 17 novembre avec Samlo et ses deux concurrents, et qui a ensuite engendré la lettre que nous connaissons désormais envoyée le 18 novembre à l'ambassadrice de France à Maurice. N'y a-t-il donc pas un monitoring effectué au niveau du ministère pour anticiper ce manque de production d'oxygène dans notre pays?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I invite the member to come with a substantive question because this is on high flow oxygen. So I will definitely give all the elements that he requires.
Honourable Minister, if I refer to the question of my honourable friend, can you confirm whether the company is VD Limited?
Some VNS Diagnostic Limited.
The Honourable Minister just mentioned that procurement has been sent for supplying hospitals with further high-flow oxygen meters, and is expected to reach by the early of January, 8th of January. We are today the 30th of November, and for the last 1 month, we had already 350 dead people in this country due to COVID-19. Are we going to wait for further 350 people to die? Because high-flow oxygen meters is now the critical equipment for survival of patients in any ICU case places.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm sure I'm going to reply to you. I just invite you to be calm. There is nothing to be excited. You should refer to the answer for the last week, what the reply I made. I will repeat it again. I'm informed that there is one high-flow oxygen. I have to repeat it again. In addition, there are 2 portable ventilators and 10 ICU ventilators at ENT Hospital, as well as 3 portable ICU ventilators at Victoria Hospital, with the option of high-flow oxygen cannula. So, it's high-flow oxygen cannula. So this reply has been given to me by inputs received from the senior surgical technologist. So if you want to take his place, then I invite you to do that. So that's what has been given to me, that's what I replied last week, which can be used to deliver high-flow oxygen to patients. So in all, 16 apparatus to deliver high-flow oxygen. One.
Next question.
B1264.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that Résidence Sir-Gaëtan-Duval, as commonly known Cité Movilac, is located in the Pai West region. I'm informed by the NDU that this particular region does not have any drainage infrastructure and is affected during heavy rainfall. Also, the road thereat requires full-width resurfacing works. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a need to address the problem in the region of Résidence Sir-Gaëtan-Duval holistically. In fact, I wish to inform the House that my colleague, the PPS Dr. Honorable Mrs. Doreen Chakori, has on several occasions visited the locus and has requested the NDU to initiate appropriate measures to address the issues relating to both the drainage network and the road resurfacing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the work is complex, covering some 1.2 kilometers of roads and a network of drain which has to be provided within a densely built-up zone with some 100 houses served by underground services. In addition, there are some low-lying areas in that zone. The works to be undertaken, therefore, require specialized skills, particularly for the design of an appropriate drain network and outlets for storm runoff. In this respect, with regard to part A of the question, the services of a consultant are being enlisted for the design, supervision, and management of the project. A bidding exercise is being carried out by the NDU for the appointment of a consultant. The opening of bids is scheduled for 22nd of December 2021. Based on the proposal of the consultant and after consultation with the Land Drainage Authority, an appropriate implementation schedule will be worked out to ensure that the problem in the region is addressed at the earliest. Mr. Speaker, sir, as regard to part B of the question, I'm informed that the project is estimated to cost around 30 million rupees. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je tiens à déposer à la Chambre 2 photos qui illustrent l'état des rues de la résidence Gaëtan-Duval, aussi connue comme cité Movilac, comme l'a précisé le ministre. Je précise que j'ai pris moi-même ces photos pas plus tard qu'hier, où on voit très clairement qu'il y a plus de crevasses que d'asphalte. Lors d'une PQ qui avait été posée par mon collègue l'honorable Armance au ministre du Local Government, il avait été effectivement mentionné ce budget de 30 millions de roupies. Puis je demandais au ministre la confirmation que ce budget et que ces travaux sont bien prévus au cours de cette année financière 2021-2022.
Monsieur le Président, comme je viens de le dire dans ma réponse, qu'on est en train de travailler dessus. We are here in a very built-up area. We have under-road services, CWA piping, wastewater, etc. qui passent en dessous. And we have got the pictures also, and we don't need pictures as such because my honorable colleague Doreen Chakori, despite her condition, is underground night and day and is following closely for it to happen, so you don't have to worry about this one. And our officers also are looking into. And we need a holistic solution. We can't just come and tar the road. So we need to go into, and as I've said already, we have launched a bidding exercise for a consultant. So let's wait for the consultant say. And then as soon as we have the report of the consultant, we have the money, we have the budget, and we'll start the work.
Mr. Speaker, sir, this project has been on the table since 2015. So it's been delayed now for 6 years. So I fail to understand that the minister and his PPS is night and day on this city Movilac. My question is, since we don't have a timeline, a time frame when they're going to do the drain work and resurfacing work, can he at least ensure the House that they're going to take some temporary measures regarding the road surfacing at the earliest possible?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So in fact, the honourable member is very right. He was the elected member for the government in 2015 for that constituency, and nothing was done. And once again, thank you to PPS Doreen Chakori. She is looking into. Thank you.
Next question.
B1265.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as from July 2021, bad weather allowance is being paid at the rate of 475 rupees per day to registered artisanal fishers for the days declared as bad weather for not being able to carry out their normal fishing activities. A bad weather is defined as a day when the sea is rough to moderate, or moderate to rough by the Mauritius Meteorological Services. My ministry received a report from the Mauritius Meteorological Services on the general state of the sea around Mauritius, which enables the computation of the number of bad weather days. I'm tabling the Mauritius Meteorological Services report for the period 16 August 2021 to 15 September 2021, 16 September 2021 to 15 October 2021, and 16 October 2021 to 15 November 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are 3 categories of registered artisanal fishers, namely in-lagoon fishers, in-lagoon, off-lagoon fishers, and off-lagoon fishers. As at date, out of 1,778 registered artisanal fishers, only 51 are in-lagoon fishers who are concerned with the zoning system. As regard to in-lagoon, off-lagoon, and off-lagoon fishers, they carry out off-lagoon fishing activities. Thus, they all receive the same amount of bad weather allowance depending on the number of off-lagoon bad weather days as confirmed by the Mauritius Meteorological Service. With a view to ensuring that the registered artisanal fishers concerned are paid bad weather allowance where applicable by the end of every month, my ministry compute the relevant bad weather allowance for the period from 16 of one month to 15th of the following months. The first step for the payment of bad weather allowance is a stamping of fishermen registration cards, which is carried out from the 16th to the 23rd of every month. The second step is to cross-check the records of fishermen registration cards, which have been stamped against the main register in the fisheries post to ascertain that the fisher is indeed active in fishing activities and is not drawing any other social benefit. I'm informed that for the period from 16 August 2021 to 15 September 2021, the Mauritius Meteorological Services had declared 20 days as bad weather. Subsequently, out of 1,834 registered fishers for that period, 1,752 eligible registered artisanal fishers were paid 9,500 rupees each as bad weather allowance, amounting to a total of 16,156,650 rupees for that period. The number of registered artisanal fishers, depending on death, voluntary relinquishment of fisher card, or not stamping of fisher card at all. As regards bad weather allowance for the period 16 September to 15 October 2021, I'm informed that 7 days have been declared as bad weather days by the MMS. Thus, 1,736 out of 1,829 eligible registered artisanal fishers have received 3,325 rupees each as bad weather allowance, amounting to a total of 5,645,850 for the period 16 September to 15 October 2021. Furthermore, I'm informed that 2 days have been declared as bad weather by the MMS for the period from 16 October to 15 November 2021. Thus, 1,570 out of the eligible registered artisanal fishers were paid 950 rupees each, amounting to a total of 1,484,850 rupees as bad weather allowance for the period of 16 October to 15 November 2021. As for the 51 fishers, in-lagoon fishers, the bad weather allowance varies depending on the weather condition in the respective zones. I'm informed that an average amount between 950 to 2,295, totaling an amount of 198,000 for this particular period. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I'm tabling the breakdown of the amount of 23,485,300 rupees paid to eligible registered artisanal fishers as bad weather allowance for the period 16th August to 15 November 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, I further add that the bad weather allowance for 2020 has been 110,480,225 rupees, at an average of 55 plus minus to 60,000 per fisher yearly.
Je remercie le ministre pour sa réponse. Et avec votre permission, Monsieur le Président, je me permets de dire au ministre que je suis heureux de le retrouver dans cette Chambre. Je n'aurai donc qu'une seule question supplémentaire en raison de cette nouvelle disposition qui concerne notamment les pêcheurs ayant atteint l'âge de 65 ans et plus, toujours en lien avec le Bad Weather Allowance. Le ministre peut-il éclairer la Chambre sur le traitement qui va être réservé à ces pêcheurs ayant atteint 65 ans et plus et qui refuseraient de rendre leur carte de pêcheur ou de la transmettre? Est-ce que ces pêcheurs continueront à percevoir la bad weather allowance.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that although all registered artisanal fishers aged 65 years and above who continue to operate, they will continue to derive their old age pension of 9,000 rupees. They will continue to benefit from bad weather allowance and all the privileges and incentives put at the disposal of the fisher community, such as life jacket, icebox, loan facilities from the DBM for the purchase of fishing equipment, boats, outboard motors, etc. They will continue to benefit.
The table has been advised that PQB 1283 has been withdrawn. Next question.
B1266, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed by the Municipal Council of Aqua Phoenix that following a request made on the 26th of December 2018 to the National Development Unit for the construction of a new box culvert and retaining wall at Futlu Lane, Phoenix, financial clearance to the tune of 4,140,000 rupees was obtained on the 18th of April 2019. On the 17th of May 2019, bids were invited by the Municipal Council of Aqua Phoenix for the construction of a box culvert, retaining wall, and widening of the existing bridge at Futlu Lane, Phoenix. The contract was awarded on the 17th of September 2019 to Now Wrong & Company Limited for the construction of a box culvert and the widening of the pedestrian bridge for an amount of 2,530,000 rupees, inclusive of VAT, and a contingency sum of 100,000 rupees. I'm informed that the Council did not proceed with the construction of the stone masonry retaining wall, which was an optional item in the bidding document, since the total amount quoted by the contractor for the whole project amounted to 4,830,000 rupees, inclusive of VAT, which exceeded the finance clearance obtained from the National Development Unit for a sum of 4,140,000 rupees. However, following a visit effected at the site by the civil engineer of the Council, the construction of an additional length of 25 meters of drain was recommended at the site. The construction of the drain at a cost of 447,000 rupees, inclusive of VAT, was approved at the Public Infrastructure Committee meeting of the Council held on the 5th of February 2020. I'm informed that the construction of the box culvert, widening of the pedestrian bridge, and construction of the additional drain at Futlu Lane, Phoenix, was completed by the contractor on the 5th of March 2020.
Is the Honourable Vice Prime Minister aware that several inhabitants of that region have made complaints that instead of that bridge being widened, they have in fact narrowed that bridge? Have he received those complaints?
Receive any complaint like that, but I'll just...
Will the Honourable Vice Prime Minister carry out an internal inquiry and ask for a full-fledged report from the Municipal Council of Aqua Phoenix as to the state of affairs, as instead of this bridge being widened, it has been narrowed and it is causing serious inconvenience to people in that region?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll look into that issue.
Next question.
B1267, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the Ombudsperson for Financial Services has made some proposals for legislative amendments in its report for the period starting 1st March 2019 and ending on 30th June 2021. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to remind the House that the Ombudsperson for Financial Services Act was amended recently through the Finance Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2021, inter alia to, first, to empower the Ombudsperson to notify the issue of instructions and guidelines or impose requirements on financial institutions. 2, extend the delay during which a financial institution has to communicate its decision to an aggrieved financial services consumer following written representations made by the consumer to the financial institution from 10 days to 30 days. 3, empower the Ombudsperson to reject a complaint where the complainant does not have sufficient interest in the matter. And 4, remove the requirement that for a complainant to make a sworn statement waiving his right to initiate civil proceedings before the court in respect of the same complaint that is considered for the Ombudsperson to hear and determine the complaint. Mr. Speaker, sir, legislations by their nature are not static but dynamic. Therefore, legislators have to adapt to different circumstances as well as have an open ear to suggestions from stakeholders. The above-mentioned amendments brought to the Ombudsperson for Financial Services Act illustrates government's commitment to always be open to constructive proposals and give due consideration to those proposals wherever possible, in line with the established legislative procedures, and also to ensure that the letter of the law matches with the spirit of the Act when it was first created, whilst acknowledging the need to adapt to new circumstances. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that the Ombudsperson for Financial Services has only made an official request to my ministry for the widening of the power of his office to cover other sectors, namely, first, the Development Bank of Mauritius, secondly, the Mauritius Civil Service Mutual Aid Association Limited, thirdly, the Mauritius Housing Company Limited, and fourthly, cooperative societies registered under the Cooperatives Act 2016. This is being envisaged at the level of my ministry. As regards the other amendments to the Ombudsperson for Financial Services Act mentioned in the report, no official requests have yet been made to my ministry.
Will the Honourable Minister confirm that, in fact, one of the main recommendations is for more accountability? That is, the Ombudsperson for the Financial Services have recommended that a select committee of the National Assembly be set up so that he is accountable and answerable to that committee? Is he aware of that recommendation of that report?
If you go by the report, you will see what are the proposals made. It's all in there, so everyone is aware of that.
You have one?
Will his ministry set up a committee to work together with the Attorney General's office to bring to this House, with a certificate of urgency, amendments being proposed in those recommendations as per that annual report of the Ombudsperson for Financial Services?
So, Deputy Speaker, sir, these are matters of policy, and as I said in my reply, we haven't received any requests as such with regard to this particular issue. So we'll wait for that, and then we'll consider.
Yes. The Ombudsperson wants now to report to the President instead of to the Honourable Minister. Has the Ombudsperson discussed with the Minister with regards to this proposition first, or he just made it in his report as we have taken cognizance?
Mr. Speaker, sir, he hasn't discussed with me on that matter. Sorry? He hasn't discussed with me on that matter.
So the table has been advised that PQs B 1276, B 1277, B 1278, B 1279 have been withdrawn. Time over.
Motion.
The Speaker, sir, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
The question is that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favour say aye. Those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it.
Statements by ministers.
Honourable Gano.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I'm making a statement on the 5th Trade Policy Review of Mauritius. The 5th Trade Policy Review of Mauritius was held at the World Trade Organization from the 9th to the 11th of November 2021 in Geneva. The Trade Policy Review is a transparency exercise mandated by the Marrakesh Agreement establishing the WTO, the objective of which is to examine the trade policies and practices of the member states. Mauritius, as a developing country, is reviewed every 7 years. The review exercise is based on a report prepared by the government and an independent report prepared by the WTO Secretariat. WTO member states are given the opportunity to submit written questions on these reports 2 weeks prior to the review, and to make oral statements on the assessment of the trade policies and practices in the plenary of the first day of the review exercise. Responses to these written questions have to be submitted at latest on the last day before the review. Reaction to the oral statements made during the review by the WTO member states and any clarification sought have to be provided in the closing statement on the last day. Mauritius reviewed some 172 written questions, including from the key players such as the US, the EU, China, India, Canada, and Japan, and 12 additional written and follow-up questions during the review. Responses to these questions were submitted within the prescribed deadline. Sir, the chairperson for the review meeting, His Excellency Dr. A.L. Molokome, permanent representative of Botswana to the WTO, laid emphasis, among others, on the openness of the Mauritian economy and the economic reforms pursued during the review period, which led to Mauritius becoming an essentially services-oriented economy. The discussant, His Excellency Dr. Cleopa Mailu, permanent representative of Kenya to the WTO, highlighted that Mauritius was a vibrant democracy where good governance, the rule of law, transparency, and respect for institutions were key principles that underpin development. He also underlined the active trade diplomacy pursued by Mauritius and the trade and business facilitation measures taken to improve the business climate. In my presentation of the trade policies and practice of Mauritius, I dwelled lengthily on the impact of the COVID-19 and the wide array of measures taken by the government to sustain jobs, to address the socio-economic challenges, and to put the economy back on the path of recovery. In particular, I laid emphasis on the Plan de relance de l'investissement et de l'économie of the government, which was aimed at improving social resilience and the business environment, upscaling infrastructure development, facilitating the establishment of sustainable smart cities, and the decarbonization of the transport industry as part of the broader green agenda of Mauritius. Some 51 WTO members took the floor to comment broadly the government and Secretariat reports. The economic reforms undertaken by Mauritius to facilitate trade and investment were widely acknowledged, as well as the key measures adopted by government to mitigate economic shocks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Members praised Mauritius for its openness and its continued effort to further diversify the economy and to expand market access and investment opportunities through the conclusion of the free trade agreements. The role of Mauritius in the consolidation of regional and continental integration was emphasized. In conclusion, I summarize the key priorities of government to stimulate the economy following the impact of COVID-19, an exceptional boost to investment, shaping a new economic architecture, and restoring confidence. Moreover, I reiterated the commitment of Mauritius to pursue business and trade facilitation reforms to further revamp the attractiveness of Mauritius as a place to do business. The challenge for the immediate future was to stimulate economic recovery while addressing the impact of climate change. All the statements made by the member states qualified the trade policy review of Mauritius as highly successful. In the margin of the trade policy review, sir, I participated in a number of high-level meetings and events. I met with Her Excellency Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the WTO, His Excellency Mr. Tang, Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization, the WIPO, Her Excellency Pamela Coke-Hamilton, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, Mrs. Rebecca Greenspan, Secretary General of the UNCTAD, and His Excellency Mr. Hulin Zhao, Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union. The objectives of these meetings were primarily to consolidate further the excellent working relations of Mauritius with these organizations and seek their support on some key projects. I also made a statement at an information session on the pandemic and the rising shipping rates organized by Her Excellency Dr. Iweala, Director General of the WTO. Furthermore, in my capacity as coordinator of the African group at ministerial level of the WTO, I participated in the opening of a retreat organized by the African Union on the 12th of November, the aim of which was to frame the negotiating positions of the group for the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference.
Honorable Wamanu.
Speaker, sir, with your permission, I wish to make a statement on the outcome of my participation and of senior officials of my ministry in the 26th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate, also referred to as COP26, which was hosted by the Government of the United Kingdom from the 31st of October 2021 to the 13th of November 2021 in Glasgow, Scotland. Mr. Speaker, sir, this statement is an unusually lengthy one in view of the importance of the subject matter. I shall therefore crave for the indulgence of honourable members. The COP26 summit brought some 39,000 delegates from 197 country parties together to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The main objective of COP26 was to finalize outstanding issues which had remained unfinished since COP25 in Madrid in 2019, namely with regard to climate change adaptation, mitigation, finance, Article 6 on market and non-market mechanism, and the finalization of the Paris Rulebook, amongst others. The COP presidency, Mr. Alok Sharma, had set itself the ambitious task of keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius alive, referring to the stretch target of the Paris Agreement that will limit some of the most destructive impacts of climate change if achieved. COP26 was kick-started by the World Leaders Summit, which was held on the 1st and 2nd of November 2021. Same was attended by a delegation led by the Prime Minister and comprising myself and senior officials. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the opening ceremony, the British Prime Minister underlined the urgency for action to reverse global warming and call upon world leaders to commit themselves towards attaining net zero emission by 2050 through the motto, coal, cars, cash and trees. He called for phasing out of the use of cars with hydrocarbon internal combustion engine by 2035, coal-fired power station to end by 2040 in the developing world and by 2030 for the developed world. A halt and reversal of deforestation by 2030, and the developed countries to mobilize 100 billion USD yearly, as promised in Paris, to help the rest of the world to move towards green technology. During the summit, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, also emphasized on building a global coalition to reduce emissions to net zero and on the need to assist the small island developing states which needed urgent funding to attain the set objectives. With respect to the Republic of Mauritius, the Prime Minister underlined the vulnerability of our island to climate change and highlighted the various commitments taken by government to ensure that the objectives set out in our nationally determined contributions could be achieved, namely, reducing gas emissions by 40% by 2030, achieving 60% of green energy in our energy mix by 2030, phasing out coal in electricity generation by 2030, promoting a circular economy involving 70% of waste from landfill by 2030, encouraging the use of electric vehicles, and promoting smart agriculture and island-wide tree planting programs. Mr. Speaker, sir, the World Leaders Summit was also marked by the launching of a joint initiative by India and the United Kingdom on the infrastructure for resilient islands on the 2nd of November 2021 by 6 heads of states, including the Prime Ministers from India, UK, Australia, Fiji, Jamaica, and Mauritius. The aim of this initiative is to support states in achieving sustainable development through a systematic approach to resilient, sustainable, and inclusive infrastructure. Accordingly, Mauritius would benefit from the systematic approach of risk and resilience assessments to facilitate risk-informed infrastructure design and planning and post-disaster assessments of critical infrastructure sectors to support recovery and reconstruction, among others, along with reaping interlinkages and synergies among small islands developing states, as well as across 6 regions. A roundtable discussion on understanding island climate priorities at COP26 was also organized on the 2nd of November 2021 by the United States Secretary of State, whereby the Prime Minister was also invited to participate. The deliberations focused on the need to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius target, climate financing, the damage caused by climate change, and the need for support for adaptation. The Prime Minister underscored the difficulties faced by small distant islands like Mauritius in sustaining their economic growth due mainly to the obligations in treaties relating to commerce and trade being imposed by developed countries, particularly in the financial sector. In the margins of COP26, 133 countries, including the Republic of Mauritius, also supported the Declaration of Forests and Land Use initiative during a symbolic ceremony which was attended by the world leaders. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Glasgow Climate Pact that emerged from the summit at the last hours was a compromise decision and was welcomed by many developing countries for its commitment to doubling adaptation finance and requesting developed countries to present more ambitious climate pledges next year. Small islands, developing states, and least developed countries in general were disappointed that this conference once again failed to provide vulnerable nations with the financial support to rebuild and respond to the unavoidable impacts of climate change, namely through the loss and damage mechanism. Much was also made of a last-minute intervention that saw language around moving beyond coal weakened in the final text. The call to phase down unabated coal use is nevertheless unprecedented in the UN climate process. It has to be said that this was the first ever COP decision to explicitly target action against fossil fuels, calling for a phase down of unabated coal and phase out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. The mention of coal and fossil fuels at the COP is actually a huge step forward. Even if, as a small island developing country like Mauritius, we welcome the phasing out of coal. However, we also recognize that the speed of the phase out is of high relevance to certain developing countries. There is also the question of the shortfall from developed countries to deliver on their promises to provide finance and technological support for developing countries to move towards cleaner energy. The debate around coal phase-out should be viewed from the lens of national circumstances and equity to enable poverty alleviation and promotion of sustainable development. On the other hand, the highly anticipated finalization of the Paris Rulebook has been agreed. The pending issues with regard to Article 6 for an international carbon market mechanism, the enhanced transparency framework to track and communicate progress on emission reduction, and the common time frame for NDC updating have been agreed. This will now provide country parties with crucial set of guidelines and modalities to embark on the implementation phase of the Paris Agreement. Similarly, the Glasgow Climate Pact has basically introduced a broad political cover decision calling for renewed efforts to raise ambition on cutting emissions, climate finance, adaptation, and the loss and damage already being caused by warming. The Pact requests countries to raise their ambition again next year and creates a Glasgow dialogue on funding for loss and damage, as well as pledging to double adaptation finance. As far as the formal negotiation process is concerned, there were the various agenda items of the 3 main governing bodies, namely the COP26, which is the supreme body of the convention, CMP16, serving the Kyoto Protocol, and CMA3, serving the Paris Agreement, as well as the ever-present work of the two main subsidiary bodies known as SBSTA and SBI, whose more technical work program, as ever, dominated the first week. Mr. Speaker, sir, the preamble of this summit confirmed the centrality of a sustainable recovery from COVID-19 and solidarity with vulnerable parties to global efforts to tackle climate change. The COP26 also provided the opportunity to connect, create network, and share national perspective with other country parties, non-governmental organizations, and technical experts on various climate change-related themes and topics. The Mauritian delegation was able to participate in some 12 side events in the margin of COP26. It was the opportunity for Mauritius to share its standpoint and challenges as an African small island developing state. In that endeavor, we had the opportunity to participate in a series of site events. The main ones are the Energy and Empowering Post-Coal Alliance event, which was organized by UK, the Climate Finance Loop for Effective NDC Implementation event, which was organized by the Commonwealth Secretariat, the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States Partnership event, which was aimed at strengthening cooperation and climate action and the use of science-based information to build resilience, the African Islands Transitioning Towards a Climate Smart and Resilient Future event, which was organized by the African Union Commission and the Indian Ocean Commission. The Partnerships for Island Resilience organized by USA and the former President Obama, where the issues of island state had been discussed. The side event on accelerating climate finance access for nature-based solutions in supporting climate, land and biodiversity targets, which was organized by the Commonwealth Secretariat. And the Together for Tomorrow event organized by the UNESCO, which focused on education and climate action. I have also participated in a platform together with Mr. Hakim Steiner, the UNDP administrator. Mr. Speaker, sir, it has been gathered that there are sufficient potential sources of funding and technical assistance which could be explored under new and forthcoming initiatives, namely, first, the Nationally Determined Contribution Partnership under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Second, the Climate Promise Initiative, Pledge and Impacts under the United Nations Development Programme. Third, the local 2030 Network Island Net Zero Programme under the United States Ocean Islands Partnership Programme. And fourth, the upscaling of funds under the second phase of ADAPT Action Programme of the Agence Française de Développement. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the 13th of November 2021, COP26 concluded in Glasgow with all countries agreeing the Glasgow Climate Pact to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold alive and finalize the outstanding elements of the Paris Agreement. The Glasgow Climate Pact comprises some 55 key decisions towards enhancing ambition and actions in relation to mitigation, adaptations, and finance. For developing countries and a small island developing state, financing from developed countries is of high importance, including for the implementation of the nationally determined contributions. Developed countries are urged to fully deliver on the annual 100 billion USD goal urgently and through to 2025. They are also urged to urgently and significantly scale up their provision of climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building for adaptation, including for the formulation and implementation of national adaptation plans. Moreover, they are urged to at least double their collective provision of climate finance for adaptation from 2019 levels by 2025. I wish to also inform the House that operating entities of the financial mechanism, multilateral development banks, and other financial institutions are also urged to further scale up investments in climate action. They are called upon for a continued increase in the scale and effectiveness of climate finance from all sources globally, including grants and other highly concessional forms of finance. Furthermore, providers of financial support are encouraged to consider how vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change could be reflected in the provision and mobilization of concessional financial resources, and how they could simplify as well as enhance access to finance. The Glasgow Climate Pact, combined with increased ambition and action from countries, means that 1.5 degrees Celsius remains in sight and scales up action on dealing with climate impacts. But it will only be delivered with concerted and immediate global efforts. The COP will continue to work to ensure that fund flows to developing countries and in small islands developing states. Mr. Speaker, sir, to conclude, I wish to cite the COP26 President Alok Sharma. I quote, "We can now say with credibility that we have kept 1.5 degrees alive, but its pulse is weak and it will only survive if we keep our promises and translate commitments into rapid action. From here, we must now move forward together and deliver on the expectations set out in the Glasgow Climate Pact and close the vast gap which remains. We need to continue our efforts to get finance flowing and boost adaptation. After the collective dedication which was delivered in Glasgow, the work here cannot be wasted." End of quote. With these words, I thank you for your attention.
Honourable members, I'll suspend the sitting for 45 minutes.